Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Kap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to Season 4, Episode 38 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout Week 10 and the rest of the 2024 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Kap. Nick, we're recording. It is Thursday, right before the kickoff between the Bengals and the Ravens, a good Thursday night football game in the next 2 hours. And a lot of fantasy players, a lot of relevant fantasy players. So hopefully all of you listening on Friday had a good Thursday night football start to your fantasy week. But 4 teams on bye, injuries are taking place, crucial weeks in your fantasy football season if you need some wins. And this is why we're here. And this is why we give you our mega shows on Fridays.
Yeah, for sure. And Nick talked about it. A lot of buys, 2 juggernauts on Thursday night football. So the boom bust segment, it was thin, but Nick and I did pick out the guys that we think are going to boom, the guys we think we're going to bust, the guys we know you should be starting this week that could explode, and the guys that we're either tempering expectations for or throwing on the bench. So this was definitely a thinner week from the herd.
So if you are a first-time viewer or watcher, thank you so much for joining us. We are the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast. We will give you 2 shows every week on Tuesdays and Fridays that are pre-recorded the night before. We then do a live show on Sundays, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, available on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We do recommend going to YouTube to check that one out, as it is just the best destination to consume our content and to interact with the other users on YouTube that are there in the weekly chat every week. This Sunday, we'll have a live show like we always do for Week 10 to answer all of your fantasy football questions, whether it is trades, weekly boom bust, weekly start sit, lineup decisions. We are happy to help you out. I will not be present on the show this week, but Nick's going to take care of you guys like he does if I'm out, or I do if he's out. He'll take care of you guys 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday. You can find the show on all audio streaming platforms in podcast form or on YouTube, and you can find us on social media if you have any questions during the week when we are not live. Like I said, this is our Friday show, so if you are a first-time viewer that has not seen one of our Friday shows, this is kind of the itinerary. We give you our all boom and all bust teams for that coming week, and then we end the show with each of us giving you a deep dive sleeper that you should pick up before the week to avoid having to pick up this player on the waiver wire next week. So we're going to start things off with our all boom teams, and the boom and bust teams are a little bit different in terms of how they work. So for the all boom team, it is players that are basically outside of their top 5/10, or players that are kind of flex plays, basically players that we think you might not be 100% sure about starting, and our job is to tell you why we should start those players. The bust team is a little bit different, and I'll get into that when we go to our bust teams. But for the boom team, you're not going to see guys like a Justin Jefferson or a Bijan Robinson. Those guys are locked into your lineups. The only time you'll see a star player on the all boom team is if that player has had a slump of like 3 or 4 weeks. It's like, all right, this is the week that maybe Jamar Chase has gotten off to a really slow start. This is the week that he's gonna break out. So with the all boom team, Nick, and the last thing I will mention here is that our all boom and all bust teams are cross-referenced. So you will get 7 booms from Nick, 7 booms from me. Same with the busts. So 14 total booms and 14 total busts. And we normally don't know each other's teams. Sometimes we do have the same players, so we do end up knowing a player or two, but otherwise we won't know each other's players. So Nick, who is your all boom quarterback for Week 10?
So we did have some overlap this week, but not at the quarterback position. I am going with Sam Darnold, the guy that's never winded up on my all boom team, but he gets a great matchup this week. The Jacksonville Jaguars, one of the worst defenses in football, and they allow second most points to the quarterback position for fantasy. And Sam Darnold's been pretty consistent. He has over 17 in all but 1 game since week 1. He's been a top 10 quarterback in 4 of the 8 games he's played, and I think he's going to do it again this week. He's also been a top 16 quarterback in 7 of 8 weeks, so he's been a top half quarterback for a guy that was really drafted nowhere, so good for him. And he also has 6 games this year with multiple touchdowns. I think this Jacksonville Jaguars matchup is the perfect opportunity for him and Justin Jefferson to go drop a ton of fantasy points and go win you the week.
All right, I'm gonna go with a guy who I do kind of kick around a little bit, being a Seahawks fan, but I'm gonna go with Brock Purdy. So, first off, Brock Purdy is facing the Buccaneers defense, and the Buccaneers defense I've been picking on for the past month or so, as they allow the most fantasy points to quarterbacks. They've allowed 24 plus fantasy points in 3 consecutive weeks. Patrick Mahomes just had his only game over 20 points, and we're in week 9. So I think the Chiefs had their bye, if I'm correct. So Mahomes had played 7 games previously where he had not notched 20 fantasy points. This might be the first time in his career that he's gone 7 consecutive weeks without a 20-plus fantasy point performance. But never fear, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense was there to give Mahomes the boost that he needed for your fantasy team. On top of the fact that the Bucs defense is very bad, Purdy's kind of come around over the last few weeks now that the 49ers are becoming healthy. He's coming off 3 consecutive games over 20 fantasy points. Debo is going to be in there. Juwan Jennings will be in there. Ricky Pearsall, George Kittle. So he's going to have his full offense, as well as Christian McCaffrey, who we think is going to play. But the reality of it is, I can't confidently say that McCaffrey's playing until this kickoff and he's standing there in the backfield and the ball is snapped.
Yeah.
The other thing that I do really like about Purdy is the highest over-under of the week at 50.5. It's tied for the highest over-under, I should say, at the moment. So there are a lot of points that could be scored in this game. The 49ers coming off the bye, I think they're looking to make a statement, and I think all your 49ers have a really good week, which does include Purdy, who is currently quarterback 10 on the season.
Yep.
Who's your first running back that you like?
I'm going with James Cook. He has been a touchdown machine this year. 8 games, 8 touchdowns between the air and on the ground. He was the RB1 just 2 weeks ago, and last week wasn't too great. He only had 10 rushing attempts, did not have a great fantasy game. But what I did see that I liked was he got 6 targets. So ever since they have tried to reform this offense, they have kind of used him in all different facets of the game, and they've been finding ways to use him. Now they get to go up against the Colts. And guess what? They stink to the running back position. They allow top 10 points per game to that. Here's the most important factor. I mentioned last week only 10 rushing attempts, but he got 6 targets. The Colts this year have the second highest rate in football of teams running the ball against them. They average 28 rushing attempts against them per game, which is incredibly high. The only team above them is the Panthers, and they're like 28.5. So James Cook is going to get volume on the ground. He might get some volume in the air, and the touchdown upside is tremendous against this weak defense.
My first one I'm going to go with is DeAndre Swift, and I blame Nick for the DeAndre Swift resurgence. Nick basically put Swift on the chopping block, and we had a segment a couple years ago. We will bring this segment back in a future season. We just decided not to this season, but we did like it, and it was called Stash or Trash. And basically, after 3 or 4 weeks, we would give you a list of players, and we would go stash or trash. Do you stash this player on the bench, or do you trash them to the waiver wire? And I would say DeAndre Swift was very, very close to getting that trash. He was probably about a week away, or Nick may have trashed him that week. But since week 4, DeAndre Swift is actually the running back 5. He has 14 plus fantasy points in every week since week 4. I think the Bears had a bye, so 5 consecutive games he has had 14 plus fantasy points. They're now facing the Patriots, who allow the 4th most fantasy points to running backs, an average of 25 points per game. Since week 4, again, the week that DeAndre Swift had his breakout, the Patriots have allowed 4 running backs to go 18 plus fantasy points against him. It's a great matchup, and a guy who really is the heartbeat of a terribly run Bears offense. They can't find a way to protect Caleb or play call to his strengths, but they have leaned on DeAndre Swift a lot. So if the Bears are going to win this game, and I think the Bears should win this game, I think they're a better team than the Patriots, they're going to have to lean on DeAndre Swift and his rushing ability. So I think he will find the end zone, and we'll have a 15 plus fantasy point performance this week.
So I actually wanted to use Swift. I didn't put him on my all boom team, knowing that Nick was going to take him on the all boom team, so I didn't need to talk about him. But
there you go.
I'll head over to running back 2 for the team. I'm going with Kareem Hunt, and Kareem Hunt has been a machine.
It's been great.
He's been great. One of the best waiver wire ads at the running back position. I feel bad for those Pacheco owners who could have seen all that production, but Kareem Hunt has been fantastic. Nevertheless, the last 4 games for him, 60% snap share. He has had 21 plus carries in every single one of those games. That leads the NFL in a 4-game stretch at any point this year. He has 5 touchdowns in those games, at least 1 in every single game. He has had a floor of 10 points in every game he played this year. Remove the the first game, and his floor has been 13.3 over the last 4, and he's had over 60% snap share in each of those games. He finished in the top 12 in 3 of those 4 games. Now he goes up against the Denver Broncos, a team that's allowing top 10 points per the game to the running back position. And last year, when Kansas City got to face this team, Pacheco and McKinnon combined for 35 fantasy points, 3 touchdowns, and 7 catches. That is a great opportunity for Kareem Hunt, who's just dominating the snap share in this backfield.
I'm lucky to have picked up Hunt in our league. That's just I'm still just struggling in due to the other receiving injuries that I have. But I have Hunt in 2 leagues, both my dynasty and this league, and he's been great. I mean, with McCaffrey coming back this Sunday, I think there's an argument to be made that Hunt could be the waiver wire pickup of the year if they don't activate Pacheco before your fantasy playoffs. My second running back choice here is another guy that I think really came off the waiver wire in many leagues, and a guy that Nick's been kind of high on. That's Tyrone Tracy. And Tracy's been a little bit of tough sledding. He's had a couple good games, a couple other down games due to the Giants' offense being one of the most inefficient offenses in the league, and an offense that does not put up a lot of yards or score a lot of points. However, they do trust Tracy. At this point, he has lapped Devin Singletary as the running back 1. And they are facing off the Carolina Panthers in Germany. Not only is this game going to be wacky, the Panthers are a bad football team, and they're very bad against running backs. They allow the most fantasy points to running backs, an average of 29.3. 8 running backs have scored 16-plus fantasy points against the Panthers. I'm not sure if the Panthers have had their bye yet, but if they've played 9 games, they've allowed 8 running backs within those 9 games to score 16-plus fantasy points. So Tracy is set up for a big game on Sunday. I think he finds the end zone, and I think he'll give you something to cheer for early on at 8:30 a.m. or 9:30, whenever that Germany game takes place.
That was the first guy I had. There was my first X, the guy that I really wanted, that I saw Nick had on the team. So for you guys, the viewers at home, we, of course, as Nick mentioned, don't duplicate. So I'm going to give you my wide receiver 1, who I had to put in place to replace the wide receiver that I saw on Nick's team.
Can you tell me which receiver so I can just go to that one?
I don't remember. Oh, yes, Tank Dell.
Okay.
So Nick has Tank Dell. And I replaced Tank Dell with Devontae Adams.
Nick loves Devontae Adams on this show.
He is my favorite wide receiver in football, has been for the last 3 weeks. And was one of my least favorite for about 4 or 5 years before that. And I don't know if he's ever made the all boom team. I'm not going back to, we've done the show for 3 years. We've done boom bust every single week.
I know he's made the bust team from your side a couple times. I don't think he's been eligible for the boom team probably until this year. This is the first year I think he's been eligible for the boom team.
Yeah. So I think it's been like 60 or 70 episodes of the all boom and all bust team from Nick and I. He's probably been on 20 bust teams and never made the boom team. Maybe more than that. Someone's got to go stat check that. I'm not doing it though. But anyway, this is a guy that has been accused of faking a hamstring injury, a guy that people said when he gets to New York, he's going to be inconsistent. He's not going to get that target share that he would have gotten as the Raiders. Didn't matter that they were upgrading from Aiden O'Connell to Aaron Rodgers, top 5 quarterback of all time. Those are the concerns. Well, I'm here to tell you, he played 3 games with the Raiders this year. He played 3 games with the Jets this year. In those Raiders games, he had 27 targets, and in these Jets games, he had 26 targets. So 1 less target. He also missed a quarter and a half last game because of a concussion issue, which he made it through the protocol. I don't know if he really made it through the protocol, but he made it through the protocol, scored a touchdown at the end of the game. Now he goes up against the Cardinals, a team that is middle of the pack against the wide receiver position. And he's coming off the Jets having the extended week. They had the game on Thursday. They get a couple extra days rest. Devontae gets to heal from that concussion issue. And I think that the volume concerns were absolutely ridiculous and are proving to be. You also see Mike Williams gets traded. Alan Lazard's done for the year. It is going to be Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams getting like 70 to 80% of the target share on this team for the rest of the year, with Breece Hall probably 80%, the 3 of them.
So I'm going to talk about Tank Dell now. Tank Dell's face off against the Lions, and I do love picking on the Lions secondary. They allow the 3rd most fantasy points, 2 wide receivers, an average of 11.7. That's a low. I'm sorry, I read the wrong number there. An average of 33.5. So the Lions have been bad the last 2 years against wide receivers. Now, as for Tank Dell, he's played now 3 games or 4 games without Nico Collins and 2 games without Diggs and Nico Collins. He has 13 plus fantasy points in each of the 2 games without Stephon Diggs. And then in 3 of the last 4 games without Nico, he has 13 plus fantasy points in 3 of those 4 and 18 plus in 2 of those 4. The game is also the 3rd highest over-under of the week at 48.5. I know that Nico's trying to play this week, but that's not going to worry me because he'll just be the wide receiver 2 at that point, and CJ Stroud can easily support 2 receivers. 3 would be very tough, and Dell ended up being the odd man out when Diggs was in the lineup, and now Diggs is out for the year. So Tank Dell, I think, is actually going to sneakily might be a league winner with the production that he's going to see now with CJ Stroud. And it's a connection that they had last year. They were great together last year. So I have no concerns about him going forward. So he's on the all boom team this week. And then I think he's going to have a couple really good games down the stretch for you guys.
Nice. Other receiver, I'm going with Deebo Samuel. Nick gave all the Purdy reasons earlier. I love this week for Deebo. I like him the rest of the season. He's been banged up a lot this year. He's got to stay healthy. He's got to stay out on the field. He left 3 games early this year with injury, and he has not been able to get to 100% since week 1. He's coming off the bye, a little bit more rest, and now we know we obviously know no Brandon Ayuk for the rest of the year, but this should give Deebo a slight boost. So the first 2 weeks of the year, Deebo Samuel was the wide receiver 12 and the wide receiver 17 in scoring on each of those weeks, had 18 plus points in both of those matchups. That's when he was at his healthiest. He missed week 3 with injury, missed the other games since then. In those 2 games, saw 19 targets and 10 rushing attempts. Now, Christian McCaffrey should come back, so the rushing attempts go down, but the passing volume is going to be there. Nick talked about all the weaknesses for Brock Purdy to succeed. Well, Tampa allows top 5 points per game to the wide receiver position, so I'm going to trust that the wide receiver 1 from San Francisco, coming off a bye, getting healthier, has a big game.
I'm going to go with Brian Thomas Jr., who's made a couple appearances on both the boom and bust team this year. So he's facing off against the Vikings defense, who have allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers through the 9 weeks, an average of 37.7 given to wide receivers. Brian Thomas on the season has been the 2nd best rookie wide receiver, but sitting at wide receiver 11. He has 5 out of 9 games with over 14 fantasy points. Christian Kirk is out for the season. So now you have a number 1 target for Trevor Lawrence. A great piece in Dynasty too, by the way. But as for this week alone, good matchup. They're going to have to throw the ball a ton in this game. And I think it'll be a little bit more competitive than people might think. So I think Brian Thomas should be locked and loaded into all of your lineups this week and going forward. Your tight end, who do you have?
I'm going with my GOAT, Taysom Hill. I love this man, and he always finds a way to wind up on this team.
Nick is a Taysom Hill truther.
But I do have some more stats that I do think benefit my case for him to actually boom this week. Sometimes it's just like, you need a tight end, and he's pretty much a quarterback and a running back and a wide receiver and a tight end and a fullback and pretty much a blocker. And he's literally Kyle Juszczyk on crack for fantasy. So here's some things I want to note. He's going up against the Atlanta Falcons. One of the things I keep saying on the show, if you play in the division, you know how you perform against those teams. You can always stat check it, and that's what I did. Since 2022, the Falcons have played the Saints with Taysom Hill 6 times. 5 of those times he went for double-digit points. The worst game he had was 8.1. Earlier this year when they played, he had 14.4, was a top 5 tight end on the week, and his usage was pretty solid. Between targets and rushing attempts this year, he's getting 8, and he's also getting some passing attempts. And it's come more with Derek Carr at the quarterback helm. He's been dinged up this year and hasn't seen too much of the field, but when he's been out there, he's getting the usage, and it's all coming in these division matchups. They're going to use him. He's kind of their anchor. And Dennis Allen's fired. That should be a little bit of a boost for the offense. Usually you see the team that fires the quarterback, the head coach, get a little bit of a bump the following week. But it is the same play caller on offense. So I'm going to guess that this offense looks a little bit better, and Taysom Hill will benefit from it as he has in the last 6 times that he's played this team.
I'm going to go with Dalton Kincaid, another guy like a lot of tight ends that have really disappointed and have not led up to expectations, but he has a positive matchup here in a Bills offense that has been rolling thanks to its MVP candidate in Josh Allen. Dalton Kincaid is going to face the Colts defense. And Nick spoke about the Colts a little bit before. They allow the 5th most fantasy points to tight ends, an average of 11.7. That's where I got the 11.7 number from before. 5 tight ends have scored 12 plus fantasy points against the Colts. And Dalton Kincaid himself has had a lot of opportunities over the last few weeks. He's had 6 plus targets in each of his last 6 games, which does create a good chunk of opportunity for both PPR opportunities and end zone receptions. So I think it's a good week to get Kincaid locked into your lineups. Tight end's a tougher position because a lot of these guys you'd have to start either way. But I think if you're putting him in your lineup, you could have a little bit of confidence in him this week. So your flex player, who do you have?
I'm going with Josh Downs, a guy that I have not boomed, I don't think, ever. I really went a little bit different this week, and he has a very tough matchup this week. We'll get into it a little bit more down the line, but Josh Downs has been really good. My takeaways from earlier this week on our Tuesday show were guys that have outperformed their expectation, guys that have been a lot more consistent for fantasy. I missed on Josh Downs. Over the last 6 games, mostly with Flacco, some with Anthony Richardson, he has 12 plus points in 5 of them, 9 targets in 5 of them, touchdown in 3 of them. The volume has been great. He is doing exactly what we projected for Michael Pittman to do. Now he gets Flacco. In the division, they get to face, he's Flacco, who used to play in the division of their opponent this week, the Buffalo Bills, when he was a Jet. He was not great. He didn't play many games. He didn't play many snaps when he was a Jet, but he does have a perfect passer rating against the Buffalo Bills. Not saying that means too much, but when he was a Jet for 2 years, he did get to learn this defense, the Doug McDermott defense, and has that opportunity. So here's the way I see this coming. This is a trap spot for the Bills. Last week, emotional game, Miami beat them at the end of the game. Now they go on the road to Indy, and then they host Kansas City next week. This is a bad spot for Buffalo. It has been whenever the week before they play Kansas City, they always struggle because they're looking a week ahead. Now you get Flacco, and I think he's going to look like he did in 2023. I think he's going to decimate this team. I think he's going to I don't think the Bills are going to look very good in this matchup on the defensive side of the ball. And if they do, it just means the game script's going to be even better for Josh Downs to get more targets and more PPR work.
I'm going to go with Jordan Addison here in the flex spot, who's been a little bit disappointing. He hasn't gotten the target share that I think we thought we would. He's been a little bit banged up. And the Vikings disappointed last week. I threw up a stinker on Sunday Night Football. I think they won. I can't even remember, but I'm pretty sure they won. It was an ugly, ugly game. But with that said, the Vikings still have a ton of stars on offense. Sam Darnold is still going to throw for a ton of yards, and they're facing the Jaguars. So it's a good matchup here for all the receivers, including Addison. The Jaguars allow the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers, an average of 32.2. Addison's posted a couple games over double-digit fantasy points already, so he does have chemistry with Sam Darnold. So I think this is a good week for the Vikings to kind of retool their offense and to kind of get things going for Sam and the rest of those receivers. Going to kick it out to the all bust team. So with the all bust teams, the difference between boom and bust is everybody's available on the all bust team, and we've successfully busted a bunch of stars this week. I think I had Jamar Chase on the all bust team with the Chiefs, or maybe Nick did. Nick got Tyreek Hill against I can't remember the team, but I think we both had both Tyreek Hill and Waddle on our bust team for a couple weeks with Tua out. I think I have a Jonathan Taylor on the bust team successfully. So we have successfully busted stars a couple times this season. So it's fair game for everybody, unlike the boom team. So Nick, let's start with quarterback. Who is your all bust quarterback for week 10? And again, Nick got first dibs on the all bust team. So I do know his quarterback. I think I know both his running backs, and I know 2 of his receivers, I think.
Wow. Okay. So you really cleared out my team. 7 guys, 5 of them, but we'll get into it. Hopefully you could just reinforce the takes because we both feel it.
Oh, I did no backup research once I knew your guys, but I can definitely have your back and stamp of approval.
Sure. Kyler Murray. He's going up against the Jets, top 5 against the quarterback position. But I looked into Kyler Murray's metrics, and I'm a little concerned for his fantasy production for the rest of the season. So we'll get into it a little bit. His rushing volume is down significantly. He has not had more than 7 rushing attempts in a game all year. Now you might think 7 rushing attempts is pretty solid. Well, in his total rushing attempts, his rushing attempts per game right now, it's about 15th in the league. When you think of Kyler, you think of a top 5 runner, a gadget quarterback that kind of moves out the pocket, makes those types of plays. He's in the realm of Brock Purdy, Geno Smith, and Sam Darnold. That's not great. So clearly he's a better runner than those guys, but the low volume is a concern. Now we look at him as a passer. He only has 2 games this year with 2+ touchdowns in the air, which is not good. It's not good enough for a quarterback. It's not good enough for a guy that's not running enough. He only has 2 rushing touchdowns on the year. That he's not keeping up with Jalen Hurts or Jaden Daniels' pace. So now he gets the Jets, the toughest secondary in football. They played a ton of tough defenses, and he's put up some good games. Buffalo, Miami, Detroit, Rams, Chargers, Chicago, all rank in the top 10. So this is not going to be unfamiliar for him to see this. But, Nick, we got to talk about the elephant in the room with Kyler Murray. What came out 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, there we go. It's Call of Duty season. It is Call of Duty season.
Call of Duty season. And
was it 2 weeks ago? I didn't get my Call of Duty.
It came out
it was
October 25th. By the way, fun fact for the chat, I've never played Call of Duty in my life.
That's a lie. I've played Call of Duty with you.
That's a lie.
That's a lie. I've played Call of Duty with you.
You've never played with me.
Yes, I have.
I've never owned any of the games. No.
And maybe I owned it, but I have played Call of Duty with you.
I do not think
maybe not online. I think we played Gun Game or something along those lines. One of those fun mini games. I'm convinced that we did.
I don't think so.
I think we
played Madden with you. I played 2K with you.
We played enough Madden. We've definitely played enough Madden. I think you played some gun game with me.
The only gun games I've played is Fortnite and Halo 3. I've never played GTA. I've never played which is kind of crazy too. A weird one that I never. Anyway, we'll get back to Kyler Murray. So, Nick, it came out October 25th. I wanted to do my research. And guess what happened? Kyler Murray was on the road that week. He wasn't able to be at home and play the game. So what happened last week? He was at home. He got to play COD, and he scored 4.76 points against the Chicago Bears defense. His worst performance in a game where they put up 29 points in the game. It was horrendous. Now he's got back-to-back home games. He's sitting on that couch, eating his popcorn, eating his chips, and drinking his soda pop, and he is playing COD, and he's looking forward to the bye week next week where he could keep it going. I'm just telling you right now, I would be on COD watch for Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I'm a Kyler Murray owner, and I think me and Nick are both kind of high on Kyler coming into the season because we thought his ADP was too low. He's being drafted at quarterback 9 or whatever number it was.
I think that's where he's at right now.
And that's where he's at. So I guess he's performing to his ADP, but that's only because a bunch of people that were drafted ahead of him, Anthony Richardson, Mahomes, CJ Stroud, are just completely underperforming their ADPs. Shout out to us for being completely right about Stroud and Mahomes. But I did want Kyler Murray for all the reasons that Nick stated. I'm a Kyler Murray owner in one league, and I am disappointed with his performance. Baker's my backup. I'm going to bust Matt Stafford. And the only thing that I do like about Stafford's matchup on Monday night is that the over-under is very high, but I think that over-under is too high. I would recommend betting the under. He's facing off against the Dolphins.
Betting the over now.
The Dolphins are very good against receivers and quarterbacks. They allow the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, an average of 10.9. The Rams are actually only averaging the 9th fewest points per game. And I know they've been banged up. I know that Stafford does have his full arsenal around him. But that Dolphins defense is pretty tough on quarterbacks. And I think who's home in this one? Are the Rams home? I should have known this, but I want to say the Rams are probably home. The Rams are home, so there's a little bit of a bump for Stafford, but I think it is going to be a tougher matchup than people are implying for this defense. So if you picked up Stafford, in place of Dak, or if you're bye weeks or whatever, just be prepared for maybe a lower than 20-point performance than you would have expected. Who is your first running back boom of the week or bust of the week?
Brian Robinson, a guy that always winds up on one of these two teams, and he is facing the Pittsburgh Steelers coming off the bye. Brian Robinson coming off an injury, but the last 3 games for B-Rob have not been good. All under 50% snap share. 2 of those games under 40% snap share. This team is really leaning into running back by committee with Eckler, him, and McNichols. So it has not been great for fantasy for him the last few weeks. The rushing volume has been pretty solid, but you're not going to run a lot against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It does not happen. He's played 3 teams this year who rank between 10th and 16th best teams against running backs. Those are his 3 worst games of the season, and he has not played a top 10 defense against the running back until this week when he faces Pittsburgh. He is not good in these matchups, which is good to know. You know, if he's playing an easier defense, you can play him, and if he's playing a tougher defense, you can bench him. But he belongs on the bench for this week.
All right. So again, I had to kind of reach to my number 3 and 4 favorite running backs to bust in the week. And I'm going to go first off with Joe Mixon. And Joe Mixon's the guy that I really liked coming into the season. I was all over him in the offseason. Shout out to me for that. Not a shout out to me for not finding any way to draft him in any of my 3 draftable leagues. Just didn't happen. Sometimes the draft board doesn't, come your way. But anyway, facing the Lions. That's the thing. Every time a running back is facing a Lion, they end up on my bust team because the Lions are very, very good against the run. They allow the 4th fewest fantasy points to running backs, only an average of 15.6. They were number 1 last year against the run as well. So the Dan Campbell team is always very tough against the run and not allowing rushing yards. And I think Mixon will have a fine game, but I think his ceiling is closer to 15 than 20. And the thing is, Joe Mixon has been very, very good this year when he's been on the field. Right now, I just want to get his average. His average right now is actually only 14. I'm sorry, that's in standard leagues. Joe Mixon's average right now in a PPR league is 21.4. He only has 1 game under 2 games under 20. Last week, 16.6, and week 2 when he got hurt at 8. So if you took that 8 number out, his average would be even a little bit higher. He's been great this season, but I just think the matchup's very tough. And if I'm Dan Campbell, my game plan is to really plug up the rushing lanes and force CJ Stroud to beat you. And not let them lean on that rushing attack, and just let the Lions offense go berserk like they have. So this is not a bench Joe Mixon. This is a temper expectations for Joe Mixon. And I do want to note that in this segment. So who's your second running back that you're busting this week?
So I've done it every single week. I'm busting running backs against Kansas City, and it's because they've shut down every running back they've faced. They are crushing it. They are literally on pace for the best defense against the run in the history of football. So not a single running back this year has rushed for over 58 yards. No one rushed for more than 3.5 yards per carry. It is an incredible pace for them. In the 9 games that they've played, or 8 games that they've played, there's to the RB1 on the team combined 260 rushing yards. That is about 31 or 32 yards per game. That is not good. And they're not playing scrubs. Bijan, Derrick Henry, Jordan Mason, Alvin Kamara, J.K. Dobbins, and last week, the other victim, Bucky Irving. This is the best run in the history of running backs. Javonte, if you go ahead and break that 58 mark, I owe you a lot of apologies, but I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think you're talented enough of a runner to get 58 yards on this team without breaking one loose, and I don't think that's going to happen.
I'm going to go with one of Nick's guys, Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle has a tough matchup this week, facing up against the Philadelphia Eagles, who allow the 6th fewest fantasy points, 2 running backs, an average of 16.8. There's no Dak Prescott, so we don't know how good or bad this Cowboys offense is going to look. My gut feeling is they're going to score even less points than they have already. And the Cowboys have actually averaged the 9th fewest, or I think it's 11th fewest points per game, which is a huge dip considering they scored the most points per game as of last year. We also don't know the status of Ezekiel Elliott. I know he had a 1-game suspension, so we don't know if he's going to be integrated into the game plan this week. But he's one of Jerry's kids, basically. So if Zeke's out there, that is going to be tougher for Dowdle to get the red zone looks. Who's your first receiver? I'm asking these questions as I actually do know the answer, but the audience doesn't know the answer. So to the audience, who is your first receiver?
DeAndre Hopkins. He's going up against Patrick Surtain. Like I bust every running back going against Kansas City. I bust every wide receiver going up against Surtain. He's been the best cover corner in football this year for sure. He is probably lapsed my guy Sauce, who's having a good year, but not as great of a year as he did for the first 2 years of his career. But anyways, Patrick Surtain this year has allowed a total in 9 games of 12 catches. That's absolutely ridiculous. It's on par with Revis's best season. He's really having like one of the best years of any cornerback has had in the history of football. Hopkins, fantastic last week, coming off a great game against a poor secondary in Tampa Bay. Short week division matchup. Don't love the opportunity. I think it's going to be more of a Kelsey game. Kelsey averages 9 targets per game in this matchup over the course of his entire career. He's played in this division his entire career. Every single time he's getting 9 targets. And the last 4 games, he had a floor of 9+ targets in each one of those. So I think it is a Kelsey game. I do not think it's going to be the D-Hop show.
So, again, this is another star that's getting busted and a temper expectations, and that's going to be Cooper Kupp. The Dolphins allowed the second fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, an average of 20.6. Should be shadowed by former teammate Jalen Ramsey. I'm sure they had a lot of battles in practice, so I'm sure they know each other's game. It'll be a lot of fun to watch this matchup and to see who gets the best of each other. But again, a temper expectation situation. You are not benching Cooper Kupp, but when you drafted Cooper Kupp, you expected a 20+ point performance every single week. At least I that's what I thought we would get. And I just don't think you're going to get that this week. So he makes the all bust team. Wide receiver number 2.
I think you know this one too, but this should be the last one. I think you know.
I think so. Yeah, I don't think I know
Ridley.
your flex. I don't know your flex and don't know your tight end. I did have Calvin Ridley.
Yep. So listen, his bye week came 4 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago. He is on a crazy target pace. 8 targets, 9 targets, 15 targets, 8 targets. That's 40 targets since the bye week, 10 targets per game. Of those 40 targets, he's caught 18. Yeah, that's not great quarterback play. Now he goes up against the Chargers, a top 5 team against the wide receiver position. I mean, the stats just speak for themselves. I don't need to add much more. But I am going to spoil something for Tuesday's show. Calvin Ridley is almost definitely going to be my must-trade for a wide receiver because target share like that, every game after that, he plays a top 12 team in points allowed to the wide receiver position. So he has a very good rest of season schedule. He has 4 games against teams that allow top 5 points per game to the wide receiver position, including 2 Jaguars revenge games and that in the championship game. So Calvin Ridley's got better days ahead, I think, and I hope, but this is a horrible matchup. He's just bad matchup, bad quarterback play, probably the worst in football at the moment.
This is a guy that I actually do think you should bench. That's going to be Marvin Harrison Jr., who's had a tough sledding for his rookie season, partly due to Kyler Murray, maybe due to coaching. I'm not sure, but now a really tough matchup against the Jets, who allow the 4th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, an average of 20.8. I don't think Nick's guy Sauce has been as good this year as he has been in the past. I think he gets a little bit handsy, but still a tough cover. Even if he does get handsy, that takes fantasy points away from Marv. Because listen, that's the thing. If Sauce is going to hold 30 yards downfield, you know what? Doesn't matter that they got in the red zone because you just lost your 3 fantasy points plus the 1 for the reception.
Do you remember when Hopkins a few years ago was arguing with the NFL that
yards should count basically
catching yards for stats and bonuses?
There's a reason behind it. I think you can't guarantee a catch will be made, but I do see the reasoning behind it.
Yeah.
And that'd be good for our fantasy teams. But even besides Sauce, DJ Reed's been a good corner as he has been for the past few years. So tough matchup for Marvin Harrison. I see no reason why the Jets can't shut him down. He also has under 10 fantasy points in 5 out of 9 games this season. So in terms of his production, he hasn't really been reliable, and he has been a true boom or bust. So I would actually keep Marv on the bench this week if you guys do have other options. Your tight end.
I'm going with Cade Otton. I'm going with the hottest tight end in fantasy football right now. But he's going up against San Fran, a top team against the tight end position. Otton is the tight end 3 on the year. He's been the tight end 1 over the last 3 weeks. He has 3 straight top 5 performances, including the tight end 1 on the week performance. But each one of those games came against teams that are top half of the league in points allowed to the tight end, top 16. Well, when he plays the other way, when he plays the bottom half of the league, teams that are allowed the 16th fewest, or somewhere between 1st and 16th, 76.5 points per game. Now, granted, Godwin, Mike Evans probably in some of those, but the fact is he has been taking advantage of bad matchups, and he's been taking advantage of a situation. He gets to do it for 1 more week without Evans before Evans comes back. I'm not telling you to bench him because he's on such a heater that you can't, but I am telling you short week against San Francisco is not the good. San Fran off a bye too. Very bad spot for Cade Otton.
My tight end bust is going to be Dalton Schultz. The Lions allow the second fewest fantasy points to tight ends. It's an average of 5.3. And Schultz has had opportunities, I think, over the last few weeks. Nico Collins being out, Diggs being out. Schultz has yet to have a game over double-digit fantasy points, even though he could have been the second or third receiving option in this offense. I think he's a fine player. I think he's good for the team, a good safety blanket. But in terms of fantasy football, he has not been reliable and should probably honestly be on the waiver wire. So even with bye weeks and injuries, if you considered starting him, I don't think he's going to have a good game, and I'm not even sure if he's worth rostering unless you're maybe like a 14-man league or something like that. Your flex play, who do you have?
So I did put this one on the list, and he got an absolute bag since I put him on the list. I put Chuba Hubbard.
That's pretty big news for fantasy because a lot of people were hoping Jonathan Brooks would come back, and I was talking to a couple of people about this. So maybe the Panthers will apply like a Lions scenario where they end up using 2 running backs, but it doesn't seem like Chuba Hubbard's going to be going anywhere for the next few years.
Yeah, 4 years, 32 mil. That is a big contract for a running back. So good for him. Got the bag. I did put him on the list beforehand. I'll give that disclaimer, but I'm going to give you still all the reasons why I don't like Chuba Hubbard this week. Passing volume, been horrible the last few weeks. Last 3 games, 5 total targets. They're in Germany. It's a weird spot overseas, coming off their biggest win of the year. Got Dennis Allen in the division fired. I was thinking about this while I was writing the notes. The Panthers and Dave Canales, who used to be the offensive coordinator for Tampa Bay, got Dennis Allen fired. Dennis Allen got Arthur Smith fired. There's a weird, these division games matter a lot more to this division from a bunch of, mid-level teams. Kind of weird one. And another reason I didn't like it is they are debuting Jonathan Brooks. He did get paid Chuba Hubbard, but I'm going to tell you this right now. This is a rookie that's been on IR, the first drafted running back of the class this past year. They did not need to rush him off of the IR. They're on bye next week, and they're going to Germany. For them to do this means he's getting some snap share. He is not going to fly all the way there, coming off an injury that sidelined him for 3 months for absolutely nothing. Chuba Hubbard is currently getting an 80% snap share. I think he's going to have some of this go away, probably closer to 60, 70%, which is still great for a running back, but it's not horrible. So I think there's 2 options here. Jonathan Brooks, A, takes his position because there's no reason they active him for the IR, or option B, you're a poorly ran franchise, which is the Carolina Panthers. Either way, I think Brooks is getting some workload. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but they did pay a lot of money to a running back that's a little bit older now at this point. I mean, he's in year 4, year 5, and not really great. He's not a superstar. He's not a top 16 talent in the league, I don't think, at running back. So I don't know. Didn't make sense to me. I still think he's going to be a bust.
I'm going to go with Michael Pittman. The Bills have allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points, 2 wide receivers, an average of 21.5. The Bills have also only allowed 6 touchdowns to wide receivers through 9 weeks. Pittman's highest number is 17.3, and I know that sounds good, but he only has 3 weeks out of 9 within double digits. And they did come with Flacco. I know Flacco is still starting, but we saw last week that Pittman is not Flacco-proof at this point. And even with Flacco in the game, he's not guaranteed to post a double-digit number, and we might have jumped the gun on Flacco. So I think Pittman has to hit the bench until we can see some kind of consistency within that Colts offense. So before we get out of here, we're going to give you a waiver wire deep sleeper. This week was probably the toughest week I've seen. Who's a guy that you think might be worth a shot if you have an extra roster spot?
So here's a wide receiver owned in less than 10% of fantasy football leagues, which I think we say 30% and under. This is a guy very rarely owned.
Yep.
He's one of my guys. He's been my guy for years. And I'm still going to pound the desk that Josh Palmer is a very talented receiver and on a thin waiver wire has a good opportunity. Last 3 games, he's been a little bit more consistent. 10 points, 9, 14. Not fantastic, but pretty solid. But I think he's due for a big week. The quarterback position and Quentin Johnston have been really, really good. Justin Herbert has stepped up his play. The passing volume for the team has stepped up. I think there's tremendous opportunity here for him. I think Josh Palmer is a deep receiver. He catches the ball deep down the field, which is what Quentin Johnston does. And I think at some point he's going to get the 68-yard touchdown bomb. When that happens, he is going to be the top waiver wire ad of the week. You're also going up against the Tennessee Titans, a team that is very, very good against the wide receiver position. But L'Jarius Sneed is not going to be shadowing him. He's going to be on Ladd or he's going to be on Quentin Johnson. And even if he is, it's a guy that played in the division. They know a little bit more about Sneed than they probably should. And Justin Herbert, I talked about the passing volume for multiple weeks, but over the last 4 weeks, he has a total of 1,147 passing yards. That is 287 per game. They have to be allocated somewhere. And I think Josh Palmer has the upside. And when the waiver wire is very thin like it is now, he is definitely someone that you need to add earlier rather than later, because if he gets that big touchdown game, that big bomb, which I think is going to happen this week, I think it transitions more his way, or he gets the 7, 8, 9 target game, he will be the number one waiver wire ad unless if there's an injury to a top running back.
So I was looking for opportunity here, and I see an opportunity with the Saints offense. Chris Olave is out with a concussion, and he's going to start, talking to doctors. I'm a little bit concerned he doesn't play again this season, but we'll see about that. Kamara's still over there, but they need somebody else to throw the ball to. They fired Dennis Allen. Now, Darren Rizzi, the assistant head coach / special teams coordinator, is now the head coach of the Saints, or the interim head coach of the Saints. So I see opportunities here. And the guy that I've selected is Cedric Wilson Jr., not to be confused with Cedric Wilson on the Browns. And the thing is, he hasn't shown me a ton to prove that he could really be a difference maker in the fantasy team. But again, I'm looking for opportunity this late in the season. And the opportunity that I do see is he has 3+ targets at each of his last 3 games. I believe not this past week, but the week before, I think he had 9 targets. So he does have some sort of connection with Derek Carr, does practice with Carr. And again, they are down a couple receivers at this point. There are not a lot of guys for Carr to throw to, but again, this is about opportunity. I'm almost surprised the Saints at the deadline didn't make a trade for a receiver. They probably should have. But when it comes to opportunity, I see something here. I think there will be a Saints receiver that could emerge over the weekend that is getting 6, 7, 8 targets and could make a difference in your flex spot. So this is the one that I have selected. So just keep an eye out on that Saints offense this weekend and see, where things shake out.
I like that one.
So with that said, that is our Friday show for week 10. Hopefully helped you guys with a lot of your lineup decisions, but just in case we didn't, since we can't talk about every single player, join the live show this Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, available on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. I will not be there on this one, but Nick will be there to answer all of your fantasy football questions. So make sure to check that out on Sunday. With that said, thanks again for all of your support. You can find us on all audio streaming platforms. If you're watching the show on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the channel and drop a like on this video. If you have any other questions that we cannot answer in the interim, go to our social media channels. Twitter is PrimeTime FF Pod. Instagram is PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you guys again for your support, and we'll talk to you guys on the Sunday morning live for week 10.